What's up?
Boots, first I just want to say, welcome to Bleak Week. Congrats on being bleak. How are you feeling about being bleak? Is this a badge of honor?
Does that mean that I'm bleak? I mean, that my outlook is bleak?
Well, your film's part of Bleak Week.
Okay. I guess I see it differently, but if that's how people see it, then that's how people see it. But yeah. I mean, definitely parts of it are, but I think it's optimistic at the end.
Oh, well, good. I want to get to that.
Yeah, I mean, the folks that I guess everybody's seen it, but well, it's spoilers if you haven't. Our main character can't escape the life that he's lived, the choices that he's made, and neither can the Equisapiens, who kind of were forced into a position, but that doesn't stop them from fighting back. That doesn't. Nobody, it actually, they're using, and all of the characters are using what they've been through to continue fighting.
Yeah, I do feel like when you pass through bleakness with fighting spirit, maybe you can get to hope, which makes me want to talk about a film that I've heard really influenced the making of Sorry to Bother You, which is this. I'm guessing that there are some people out here who took a leap, saw this movie maybe tonight for the first time because they heard it was.
This is the first time I've seen it.
What?
No, yeah,
what about all these interviews I've read where you were
no,
I
like
this movie?
Oh Lucky Man.
Oh, not this one?
Yeah, no, I hadn't seen it yet. Like I'd seen If and Oh Lucky Man, and Oh Lucky Man definitely had a lot of influence on it. But I needed to see this, so.
Did you prank
Lindsay,
us?
Huh?
Is this prank week?
No. I probably talked about the idea that he had this trilogy, and for some reason I kept meaning to see this, but it has a lot of the same themes in it, and this one definitely has a lot more union stuff, and I could see why this is more bleak, because he kind of has this attitude that just everybody's fucked up and whatever, and I don't have that point of view. No. But no, definitely I see why these are very similar, and I knew about Lindsay Anderson's whole trilogy. I just never saw it, and I think I also just had heard some wrong things about it, so I was like, I even have it on my laptop, but I just never got to it because I had heard some wrong things. I had heard that he did it much later, and it was an American production, and I was like, I don't know, I had wrong things.
Well, we're in for a treat.
But I see a lot of the same connections. Like you got the guy, manipulating humanity. And in this, I like the idea that this hospital that represents, in that case, British society, it is Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, right? And creating this thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like watching this, we are so primed to be rooting for the Dr. Graham Crowder, and great performance for his destruction. He's vainglorious, he's murderous. And then he gives this speech at the end, and part of me is like, oh no, I think he's making some good points.
Yeah, I mean, well, often, when I write my characters, even the ones who I generally disagree with, it's also part, it usually comes from part of me, right? Mm-hmm. So, I'm making the argument that I would make if I were them. So in this case, the writer seems like they probably did that as well, because you could, you could figure out a way to make a compelling argument using what's happening in the world for almost anything, right? We see those arguments, for everything. We see the arguments for everything that benefits capital is always the arguments for those are always embedded in something that acknowledges the inequities and something that acknowledges the power differences and somehow comes with an answer of, well, give us more power and we can fix all of these things. And so, that it's smart that he says those things. He lays out the problem that we all know. And his answer is, I don't know, get rid of humanity, right? and that definitely, I think there are a lot of films where that is the viewpoint. Like, it's all fucked up. It's always going to be fucked up. It always has been. And so therefore the only solution is, that even if it doesn't say it, it says that there is no answer to having a society based on exploitation. There is no answer to that. So it usually stops there, but this takes it even further.
Yeah, and I couldn't help thinking when I was watching this, like, Britannia Hospital seems miserable, but it also still seems better than the healthcare we have in America today. And then hating how extra bleak that made me feel.
Yeah.
And then, looking at the protest signs, the one that really popped out to me is one of the signs says, "Privilege is a crime." And it felt like a sign that I would love to see getting waved around today. I mean, watching this film, I just felt like, oh, we just keep using art to have the same arguments over and over and over again. And how can we push that into actual change?
Yeah, well, art by itself can't do it, right? Art needs to be attached to or connected to a movement that's fighting for material change. And by connected to, I mean the artists need to be involved in those movements so that the right questions are asked. There's I always like to point to this one example that's in this book called 9.5 Theses on Art and Class, and by Ben Davis. And he talks about this one example of this art show that happened in like 2002 in New York, and it was this famous artist made this installation against the war, right? And the whole thing was you walk into this big room, and there's dead things that look like dead bodies and pieces of cadavers lying around, and there's smoke and all of this stuff, and you're supposed to walk through it. And the artist's statement was, that this was in something that was done to move people to fight against the war. And but people that were involved in the anti-war movement itself were like, well, I wish this person would have talked to us because everybody's against the war already. They just don't know how we can do anything about it, right? And so that artist had the wrong questions that they were posing with their art because they weren't actually involved in trying to get people to do something. And so, when you are involved in that, you understand what people's questions are, what where the gap is between what people want and what people think they can do and what people are willing to do. And so if you have art that comes from that, it can aid those movements, right? And then and those movements can affect it. It can aid those movements, and you have that sort of a thing. But if it's just artists pontificating on how they think the world should be and what's wrong with the world, I don't really see that causing the change that we need. Right.
Well, that's why I like even the title of "Sorry to Bother You," because you're announcing in it that you want to bother people a little bit, And I like this element of your personality. One of your famous early stories is you used your band performing in a festival to go on Fox News and get in as many words as you could about capitalism before the Fox News hosts were sort of like, you were supposed to talk about music, and kind of escorted you off. And I mean, the idea of...
And that was a mistake. It was, we had just driven from Detroit to Cleveland and got there at like 5 in the morning, and Jizza was supposed to do that show. And then they came, and he was late, so they came and knocked on my hotel room at 6:30 when I had just driven. And so it was not planned. I was just tired. And they asked the question. And that's what I answered. Yeah.
And in 30 seconds, you were like, I will tell you everything.
Yeah.
But on that idea of bothering, I mean, I feel like we're in a really interesting moment for artists to be like provoking audiences for questions. I mean, just provoking, I think, is hard to do. I think on one side you have audiences who, even if they agree with you, they're like, I already know this. Why are you telling me this? They get defensive right away when art comes at you in one direction. But then I think there's other people where if art comes at you from almost an abstract or like a hostile direction, they're like, this is too much and I can't take it. And so I find that a really interesting challenge for artists right now.
Well, what I've always done with my art, I think I've always done it, is, I approach it from the idea that, yes, you already know this. We already know this. I'm going to state that because we know it, but I'm doing it from the standpoint that we already know this. Now let's go get them, right? And so it's a different thing than When we were doing music, starting doing music, there was this movement of music that they would always call conscious, and that was often preaching to the listener that you're doing the wrong thing, right? You are, hurting your community. And it was all sorts of stuff, and often it would be, actually like racist and sexist ideas about the black community by black artists because oftentimes if you don't have an analysis that says that the working class has to overthrow the ruling class, the reasons for the problems that you come up with are often in behavior, right? So we talk about things, in those ways. So it would always be like, even some of my favorite artists of the time would be like, you're fucking up the world, that sort of thing, and you gotta, you gotta pull yourself together. And so because I have an analysis that says that the working class has to organize collectively to overthrow the ruling class and get rid of capitalism, then that makes me, that changes my approach. I need to work with you. You're listening to this, I need to work with you. And it's not just like, fuck you if you don't get it. So that changes the aesthetic, and it often with our music we would be accused of not being serious enough, right? Because I had an optimism to my, sometimes it's me convincing myself, but there was an optimism I was trying to get across.
But I think where film is even different from that is there's so many people you have to get on board just to make the thing, just to create the world, just to do it. The person I really do want to talk to you about is Lakeith Stanfield, because I think what people are about to see in this film. Well, first, let me ask this. Could you sort of set up Cassius for people who haven't seen this film yet? And then the question I really want to ask you is, do you like Cassius? Do you respect Cassius?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of take the approach with all of my things. Well, the only one thing that came out so far. The only way I can write characters that kind of are close to real is that they're all different parts of me. And it's like I write them as if I'm playing chess with myself, and not just parts of me, but or it might be me if I was in that particular situation and had come up with this one idea about things. So yes, most of the characters I definitely relate to in a big way, and yeah. When I wrote this, I wrote it in waves. The first one was I just sat down in a hotel. We were on tour, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna do something." And I wrote that first scene, and it's exactly this. There's nothing got edited out of that first one, and which is probably why I did it, because it like, whoa, that feels like a movie, right? And then I kept going, and it was little by little in between touring and doing stuff, and so as at the beginning, I was writing something that I thought, okay, I'm the most famous person I have access to. So I thought I was going to play the part. I mean, this is before I got gray hair, right? And, so I thought I was going to do it, and I was going to get the record label to give me, like $50,000 that we would have spent on marketing and do a movie with it. And so I actually also wrote it based on, okay, here's what I think I actually could do performance-wise, So, which is why there was like a lean, which you don't see because Lakeith is a real actor, like, kind of a lean in the dialogue toward that mid-2000s kind of blank stare sort of stuff they were doing where people weren't really acting, So yes, that's the way that I didn't want people making wrong decisions is not doesn't make me not like them as a human being, right? So he makes a lot of wrong decisions, and I think to me that's one of the things I want. If I made, people might have expected me to make the main character Squeeze, the union organizer. But often, there's very few people that are that person, right? Yeah. I'm sorry, that was my answer. Yes, I like him.
I mean, one fun fact about Lakeith is before he made it as an actor, he was a door-to-door U-verse salesman, and he was pretty good at it. I hear.
I didn't even know that.
He was pretty good at it. But you also did your time as a telemarketer, and I was wondering what your experience was like on the other end of the line.
Oh, yeah, that's where I first was like, oh, this could be a movie. In between my second and third albums, I was 24, and I had a midlife crisis at 24, thinking like, fuck, I've been an artist all my life, and what am I doing with it? Not serious. So me and some friends created this organization called the Young Comrades, and but now I needed money, and I knew I was good at being a salesman because I had been one. I was that 11-year-old knocking on your door selling you newspapers, and I knew I was good at it, so I could do that one day a week, and then I'd have time for for organizing. But during that time is when I thought about doing that. And interestingly enough, there was a guy at that time who had contacted me about writing dialogue for his movie. He was like, I'm making a movie, and it happens in the black community, and I don't know how they talk, so can you do this? And I was like, okay. And that's how I learned Final Draft, was I did that. But then, as I was writing it, it kind of taught me some lessons because, I was like, she wouldn't do this. This character wouldn't, because I'm doing the conversation, it doesn't make sense that she makes that decision at the end. And then he's like, oh, she would do that because she's a bitch, right? And then I was like, okay, I don't want to write somebody else's story. And so I didn't do it. But that was like my, and that was like at the same time, actually, that I quit doing the music was right in line with this, because I also had this weird thing of like, where I'm like, I'm spending my life creating simulations of reality instead of creating reality. And so that's when we started Young Comrades. And now I have a more holistic understanding that it's the reality that people are taking in. So it is reality to the folks that are watching,
I do, before I watch this film, I do want to ask you about your villain, who is Armie Hammer in this. I don't want to talk about the real life shenanigans he's been up to. But I am curious, like, from the outside as a critic, I always was kind of interested in his choices I felt like he chose villain roles that he felt like he could really embody. The Social Network, The Birth of a Nation. Here, I felt like he was really interested in kind of using his facts of being like tall, blonde, and from a wealthy family to play into villain characters. And I was curious if you saw any of that or what your experience was of him.
He knew Steve Lifts, right? He grew up with them, and we had a lot of talk about what that is, what that was, what the kind of sitting around aimlessly, because Steve Lift, it's not necessarily clear he's supposed to have been born into wealth and, kind of looking for a reason, looking for something. And so, yeah, he definitely, it wasn't the villain that you're not, it wasn't the villain that makes you want to turn away, right? And that's how people get what they want, right? They lure you in. And so, yeah, he definitely brought a lot to it. I mean, the one thing he brought, and it's interesting because his way of doing things is, I went to school while I was doing this, and his way, some folks are, we kind of do it as we shoot, and he's somebody that would go over every line and ask for permission to change, and to but or whatever. And the one thing I have to give him credit for is tardigrade. There's a word in there, tardigrade, and you'll see where it comes from.
He came
where
up
it comes
with tardigrade?
In. There was a different word there, and yeah, and I didn't know what a tardigrade was until he.
Pretty cute.
Yeah.
I think they're kind of cute.
Yeah. And yeah, no, they are. But yeah, I wanted this to be, he was someone that's the life of the party, and that's part of how he gets his way, besides the wealth and power, among other people that are wealthy and powerful.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that this movie, as beloved as it was by me, by many people, did not make you a mega millionaire, one of the people that could have support a tribe for 100 years, as they're talking about in the end of Britannia Hospital. I'd love to hear your thoughts on persevering in making art when the financing of art is bleak, but also related to that. You know, we're in LA. I'm sure there are people here who are part of the writer's strike, friends, very good friends with people in the writer's strike, driving by the writer's strike.
Yeah.
And from what I'm hearing, I feel like Los Angeles seems like it's going to be in for a hot labor summer. You know, at the WGA rally last week, there were so many people there. There was SAG and the Teamsters and IATSE, but there were also service labor employees unions. That covers court reporters, that covers people who work at parks, water, teachers, healthcare workers. This summer is looking like it might be a big deal. And as a person who's been online supporting causes since you were a teenager, I'd also love to hear your, words for us, how to support, how to be active, how to be proactive.
Well, this strike, I want to say these strikes, because it may be that are, I think, going to be some of the most pivotal in history. And here's why, and I said some of this in that Deadline article, but there have been 2,900 strikes and work stoppages in the US in the last 3 years, making this strike wave the biggest since the 40s. And it's not a mistake that that national news doesn't talk about this. It also represents a new place that people are in, where people are looking for ways to change the world around them. Right? We've been told we've been told, and we've told the fallacy that what changes things is raising our voice, making our voice be heard. And artists love to say that, because often that's all we're doing, right? But we saw during the Iraq War, we had millions and millions of people on the streets all around the world. And it was like, okay, they don't like it, let's keep going, right? And it has to do with the fact that we had put out the wrong idea of how power works. That idea that all you gotta do is get people into the street and say something rests on the idea that you can shame power into action, and that that power is actually democratic in some way. But what we know, what even people that are not radical know, is that power comes from wealth, right? Everyone knows this. But what is not often talked about is that wealth comes from the exploitation of labor, and that is the motor that moves capitalism. And so therefore, the workers collectively withholding their labor is a way for us to have power over the decisions that are made. And this is something that the working class in the United States is having a new revelation about right now. Mind you, like I said, there's 2,900 strikes that have happened in the last 3 years. Very few people know that. But what they will see is this strike that's happening right now. So this is very important that we win this. because it's all eyes on us right now. And there are some things that we're fighting for that are existential issues, such as AI. And it's a lot. It's very meaningful. Just the idea, if I talk to people and say that this is one of the demands that the writers don't want to have AI write scripts, a lot of people are like, can you get that demand? Can that work? Because we hear about technology so often from the standpoint of that just what is, and that's the way that it has to be, that's the way that it will be. And so just the direction of our world being able to be decided through the withholding of labor, that's an idea that, inspires people, right? It could inspire people. And right now we have a place where hopefully DGA will come on board and make a demand around AI. And we saw the rank and file of SAG make their leadership take a stance. And we're seeing this happen. So, if this was a three-way strike, it would send ripples throughout the world. Even if it isn't a three-way strike, this fight that the WGA is doing is something that will change the course of how people fight. Because when you look at it is a little scary when you look at the idea that they have all of these billions of dollars and what we're asking for is just a couple percentage points of that. And you're like, well, why wouldn't they give that up? And one answer has to do with the fact that they don't want people to see them giving that up. And but at the same time, they don't want to lose that money, because even though they're making billions of dollars, these productions are what's making them make the billions of dollars. So if we're shutting down the productions, then we're shutting down the access to that money. And so there's enormous power in that. It's also the thing that radicalizes artists. I've seen artists in other fields saying, I wish we could be that organized. I wish we could do that. And it's making people think about the world in a much different way. And let's also speak to this solidarity that's here, that shows us the development that has happened since 2008 in the world, right? You had a couple years ago, IATSE, the membership wanted to strike. They wanted to strike, and people voted in a way which should have brought a strike, but so many people were new that they didn't know that it was a delegate system, and they said, oh, you're not actually voting on what we're doing. And so that whole group of folks are motivated to do something, and which is why they are honoring the picket lines. And how many folks are in WGA here? Okay. Any IATSE folks? All right, cool. DGA? One. SAG? Okay. The unity is something that hadn't been seen in Hollywood unions in a while. Not only the unity, but the militancy some of the stances that are being taken. Apparently, during the 2007-2008 strike, there was not that sort of solidarity. That solidarity is because people are part of this world where they're seeing folks stand up and fight, and people are becoming more class conscious, becoming more aware of the power that they're having, and and understand how important this is. And people are making sacrifices for that, right? When IATSE doesn't cross the picket line, they're sacrificing, at least a day of work. And in a time when very few productions are going. So that's a high level of solidarity. And I'm hoping and I'm expecting, from everything that I'm talking to other WGA members about and everybody's on board for, that when IATSE goes on strike, that WGA is going to do a similar thing. And so there's power on both sides of that. The Teamsters as well, right? This is a fight that even when the strike gets settled is going to have an effect on how we fight moving forward.
Boots, I can't think of a better time to have you here to have this conversation, to be showing this movie, to be having this conversation with everybody in the room. We have to let everybody stretch and get popcorn before your movie starts. I want to take 2 seconds and say, I've seen a couple episodes of your new show, I'm a Virgo. It's amazing. It's about a 13-year-old, it's about a 13-foot tall giant played by Jarrell Jerome, who's amazing. And then I got really suspicious and I looked up your sign and I saw that you were born on April Fool's Day, and I wondered, is that true or are you pranking me again?
That's true, but that I'm born on April Fool's. But yeah, I'm not here to promote I'm a Virgo because there is a strike going on.
Well, you're not. Can I say it's good? It's good. It's very good. Okay. And with that, Boots Riley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming, everybody. All right, cool.